What's up, guys? I released my college football and NFL videos for the week, so you can check those out on the channel. Those are up. I'm going to break down this card, and I have one play that I'm making here on tonight's card. We got most of the sports in action here, but most of it limited action in each sport. The NFL game Thursday night, ugly game. I mentioned this game in my NFL video. Tampa at Buffalo. Buffalo looks like they've gone up from -9 to -9.5. A 9.5 point favorite at home with 92% of the cash and 86% of the tickets on them. So, very public team are the Bills. Although it looks like they're getting more of the cash than the tickets. I think there is some respected money on the Bills. I think the Bills were lower than 9 for a bit. But I think, as I mentioned in my NFL video, the books may have moved it up, not just because they were getting a flood of action on the Bills side, but also because they were trying to limit the amount of teasers they were getting with people teasing the Bills down below the 3, which I think is also a popular play here, also happening. All that aside, situation-wise, I would only be able to look to the Bills here, I would say, even though they are massively public and a home favorite, so I don't know how much value you might really be getting there, but the Bills lost to the Patriots on Sunday. Ugly loss. The Bills erased a 22-10 deficit in that game, had the lead in the final minutes, and then allowed a game-winning drive to the Patriots when it looked like the Patriots had totally imploded and were probably going to lose again in very Patriot-esque fashion, at least the current Patriot team. That's very Patriot-esque of them. But the Patriots won that, so the Bills are coming off 2 ugly games in a row, really, where they almost lost to the Giants the week before that, so they're struggling. They're in bounce-back mode, so if there was going to be value on a team like the Bills at all, it might be when they've had a couple of really ugly, bad games in a row, and that is the case with them here. Tampa, they are not playing well either, though, right now, but it looks like they've come crashing down after a hot start to the season, which I think some of it had to do with the NFL, the rest of the league not really knowing what their offense was going to look like with Baker Mayfield. So they took some teams by surprise, perhaps, but now that there is game footage, game film, teams have seen what their schemes look like with Mayfield. It seems like they've kind of figured them out, as Tampa's offense has really struggled the last couple of games. And this is a short week. It's at Buffalo. These short week Thursday night games tend to favor the home team, especially when the road team is going into unfamiliar territory, which is the case here, territory where they don't typically play. I think that is all the case for the Buccaneers as well. It's not strong at all, but I would only look to the Buffalo side there. In college football, there are 2 games. There's an ACC game between kind of the dregs of the ACC this year, although it might be a somewhat interesting matchup from a betting perspective on its own a little bit. Syracuse is at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech looks like they were -3, -115 at one point at home, and it's gone down from -3 to -3, -105. Excuse me. It looks like Syracuse is getting some of the more respected money, perhaps, and with 80% of the cash, but 76% of the tickets. So they do seem to be the public road underdog as well in Syracuse, but Syracuse is kind of the only way that I would look, even though they're very public. The market does look like there is a little bit of movement in their direction, and these are teams that both had a bye last week to allow them to kind of prepare for having to play at a Thursday game, I suppose. Last we saw Virginia Tech, they destroyed Wake Forest at home, so they went into that bye or that extra time off on a good note, which I think might be a negative, because it's like, what do you change when things are going well in that last game? Whereas Syracuse, it was the opposite. They went into that extra time off there off of a couple of bad losses, ugly losses. I don't know if they're bad, but they got blown out by North Carolina and Florida State, which those are the 2 best teams that they played this year, but Syracuse has struggled against all 3 good teams that they played this year. Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State. They lost all 3 of those games in a row, and they went into the bye on that bad note. So I think that's more of a positive. So Syracuse can use that amount of time to collect themselves and refocus on it. So I think the bye is helpful to Syracuse, but possibly a negative for Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech does have Louisville up next, which they're a ranked team, a bigger team in the ACC. Maybe they might have one eye like looking ahead towards that potentially. So I would lean to Syracuse slightly in this game. It's not that strong, but that's the way I would look there. The NBA, 76ers, Bucks, both, I believe, opening their season tonight. They haven't played yet. Bucks look like they've gone up from -4.5 to -6.5 with 88% of the cash and 82% of the tickets on the Bucks. It looks like they're getting more of the money than the tickets, but in both cases, they are a public team, which, I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks are kind of always going to be public, but the 76ers tend to get a lot of public action as well, so that kind of surprises me a little bit, because I would think that the public, or the recreational bettor, from their standpoint, I would think that they would look at this and think, hey, this is a competitive matchup between, good teams, playoff teams, and think that, taking the points is kind of the way to go here because it's kind of a lot of points. I don't know, but it does look like money is driving the number up on the Bucks, but I'm kind of surprised that the Bucks are as public as they are, though, because I think both of these teams are considered to be good, and they both are kind of good and get some public traction there. I would kind of lean to the Bucks. The Bucks had that disappointing exit from the postseason last year, the last we saw too. 76ers made a deeper run and took my Celtics to the limit to Game 7. The Celtics are finally able to take them out with a very good Game 7 in that series. But I would lean slightly to the Bucks in that one, even though they are public. It does look like that's kind of where the money is headed a little bit, but they're up to 6.5, which is a lot worse than 4.5 to lay that. So not getting the best of it if you do that. So I would not recommend that. And then the other game, Suns-Lakers. I don't understand why this says the opener was Lakers -1, but now it's Lakers -6. I don't know if that -1 was accurate. Maybe that was a look ahead, well before the season started or something. I don't really know. I think seeing what the Lakers did in the postseason last year, I think that even though, of course, the teams are a little bit different coming into this season, teams have some changes. I think the Lakers, this line is now telling you the Lakers are the better team than Phoenix, whereas when they were in the playoffs last year, I don't think that would have been the case. I think the Suns would have been considered to be the better team, but things have changed a little bit. I don't know if maybe this is too much of an overreaction now, saying that the Lakers are better than the Suns by a few points. I don't know. It looks like the Suns are getting 82% of the cash and 70% of the tickets, so more of the cash and the tickets. Looks like the Suns are getting some public action, so could be a public underdog situation there maybe, but they're getting more of the cash and the tickets as well. Because recreational bettors might think, hey, this is a competitive matchup, kind of like what I said with the 76ers-Bucks game. They know that these are both playoff teams from last year. They're both good teams, and 6 points kind of looks like a pretty big line. So maybe there's value in taking the Suns. I would tend to look the other way in this one just because both of these teams did play already 2 nights ago, and unfortunately I lost on the Lakers. The Lakers played better than the final score would indicate, I would say, at Denver. The final score, they lost by double digits or something, so it makes it look bad, but they were within 6 or 7 pretty late in the game and statistically didn't play that poorly and outplayed Denver in some aspects of the game. So I think the Lakers, based on that result, look worse than they are, and the Suns actually had a pretty big win. I believe they won on the road that same night at Golden State. So now the Suns are staying out there in California and having to go to LA off of a big win, though. So that's a pretty big win. Open the season, you win at Golden State for Phoenix. That's pretty big. So it's possible they might have a little bit of a hangover because of that. But then you have the Lakers coming in out of high elevation because they had to start the season in Denver. So that's not really a positive either. Which one is the worst negative? I probably would say the fact that the Suns had a big win at Golden State. That makes it a little bit more of a negative because the Lakers didn't look good in their first game. That would tend to point me in the direction of there being some amount of value on the Lakers, but I don't really know how much. So that's, I guess, the way I would look there, but none of these are strong at all. And then we got the NHL. It's kind of a full NHL card, but there was only one NHL game yesterday, and I don't really see that many angles here. I can tell you that in the market, the Dallas Stars against the Toronto Maple Leafs have flipped from plus 100, so I guess they were like a small home dog to a minus 121 favorite, even though this does tell me there's 69% of the money and 50% of the tickets on Toronto. The line movement tends to indicate otherwise and indicate that Dallas has kind of moved a bit and there might be some traction on Dallas. I looked at the situation and I don't really see why that would be the case. Other than like Dallas is they're definitely off to a hot start, and I think their only loss so far is that overtime loss at Vegas in that playoff revenge game for Dallas, which was a big game. So I don't know. I don't know how much value there would be to be had on a team that has started off as hot as Dallas has. So I don't really understand the line movement there necessarily. But I'm just telling you that there does seem to be some movement there. And one game that just kind of piqued my interest a little bit, Seattle at Carolina, just because I noticed Carolina's in a bad spot, returning from a road trip. I think they started the season with a home game, and then they've been on the road, I think, since then. They played like 5 or 6 road games in a row, 6 road games. I think they kind of took them way out west and then back east. They played at least one road game in the east. And now they finally return home. So it's a bad spot for Carolina. When you return from these long road trips with not that many days off, tends to be a negative because you're dealing with those distractions of home. These guys have family and things of that nature, and they've basically been away from home for that long. So that return home in these sports like the NBA and the NHL tends to be a negative spot. So I think that's a negative spot for Carolina. But they've moved up from minus 185 to minus 193 on the money line. I don't really see numbers for the ticket and cash percentages yet on this one because it's too early, I guess. So I would tend to be looking against Carolina, so that's why this piqued my interest. But then I looked at Seattle, and I don't think they're in a good spot either. So that's kind of the issue that I have with this one. This is an interesting game, though, for sure. But Seattle just started a road trip and started it off nicely with, I believe, an overtime win at Detroit, who has been hot to start the season as well. I think they won on some, crazy overtime goal to win that one. So I think they're also in a bad spot, coming off that big win. And then it's like, well, are the Hurricanes considered to be a little bit bigger of a team, better team than Seattle is? I mean, the line is telling you the Hurricanes are a better team than Seattle. We know they are, but as far as like name recognition and like how motivated is the team going to be to play this other team, I don't know. I would think that both teams would tend to be kind of motivated just in a vacuum when playing this particular opponent. So I don't know if there's anything to say about that. I think Carolina's in the worst spot, though, returning home from the road trip. So I would slightly lean Seattle if I had to pick a side here, but Seattle's also in a bad spot off that big OT win on the road. So if they were starting a road trip, I would probably be on Seattle here. But I like those situations where a team's starting a road trip against a team that's returning from one. That tends to be a strong situation. That's not the case here, but because both these teams are in a bad spot, the over might be worth a look too. I think the total's like in the 6 range. I don't know. But just pointing it out because I think it's kind of the most interesting game on the board to me, really, from like a betting perspective or a situational perspective at least. Except the game I'm actually going to be on, because I think it's a bad spot in one direction, is against my Boston Bruins. And I haven't bet against them yet this year. I know that I said I was potentially thinking about it in their last game, which was the completion of their 4-game road trip, because they went out west, swept the western chunk of their road trip, and then played a 4th game on the road trip in the Midwest in Chicago. So they had to play across multiple different time zones, and I thought that was a bad spot for them, but they shut out the Blackhawks, and the Blackhawks were the team that the Bruins began the season against, but the Blackhawks played them fairly tough in that opening game to the season. So I thought maybe that is like the reason why the Bruins kind of took them seriously. But now I think this is the bad spot for the Bruins here. This is their actual return home from the road trip. They went out west, like I said. They beat the Sharks, Kings, and Ducks. 2 of those teams are not very good, really, even though I do think the Bruins are a pretty good team. They haven't really beat any impressive teams yet. The best teams they've beaten are Nashville at home by 1 goal and the LA Kings during that road trip by 2 goals. And now they return home off of that 4-game road trip. So not as long as a road trip as some road trips are. Like, it's not as long as Carolina's, but it's still not a good spot with 1 day off. And they swept the road trip. So I think this tendency here might be that returning home might be like a distraction and a disruption. And they play Anaheim, who's a team they just beat on the road. They went in and beat Anaheim 4 days ago. They have to play them again now on the return home at home. And after this, they play Detroit. And they play Florida, and then Toronto, and then Detroit again, and then Dallas. So a bunch of like bigger opponents after this. So it's a return home, and it might be a spot where they might just overlook Anaheim because they just beat them. So it's a road revenge, quick road revenge spot for Anaheim, which I think if revenge is going to matter at all in a regular season, in the course of the regular season in a sport like hockey, it's going to be this where the team, you just beat that team in their own house like 4 days ago. That team's gonna remember it because it just happened. So that is like a little bit of an extra motivator for Anaheim, I would say here. And the Bruins have much stronger opponents all lined up after this. So if there's gonna be a down spot and a distracted spot for Boston, and they're unfortunately because it's my Bruins in their schedule here, it's gonna be that. It's gonna be this spot right here. The Bruins are 6-0 to start the season. They're a huge favorite, but they've gone down a little bit from -310 to -302. Huge home money line. I don't see the percentages yet for ticket discrepancy and money discrepancy, but as far as ticket percentage and money percentage, I should say. But for Anaheim, the spot that they're in, I think, is a little bit better. But they have already started. This is their second game of their road trip. They already started the road trip. I wish they were starting the road trip here. They have also had 1 day off, and they did play in overtime in the next game. But I think they're in a much better spot here because I think what that game did is it helped disrupt their negative momentum. So prior to that, they lost 3 games in a row, 2 of them at home, one of them being that game to the Bruins. And then they got to get out of there after they lost to the Bruins, go on the road, play a team that's pretty beatable in Columbus. They did beat them, even though it was in overtime. And that, I think, kind of is a momentum breaker. I would say that breaks their like losing momentum that they had leading up to that. So I think that's actually helpful. You get out of there, get on the road trip, get that game under your belt. You get the positive momentum going again to come into this next game. And I think it's a team you're going to be focused on again because they just beat you in your own house, and they're one of the best teams in hockey. They're one of the only undefeated teams remaining in hockey. I think it's just the Bruins in Colorado now. And, of course, it was Bruins team, even though they've made some changes. The Bruins did still have the historical season last year as well. So I think it's going to be a spot where Anaheim has the better momentum here, the more positive momentum, the more positive scheduling spot, and more motivation here. Big game for them, and like that quick road revenge motivation there, whereas Boston might be a little bit complacent in the game because they just won at Anaheim, so they might think it's maybe going to be easy to beat them again. And they have all the return home distractions and much bigger games on deck. So I think that's the spot here. The spot dictates a play on the Anaheim Ducks, as ugly as that might be. Because the money line is so big, I'm taking the puck line, even though I don't even think the number is that great on the puck line, but I'm taking the puck line plus 1.5 goals on Anaheim, and I got it at plus 105. You can get it in like the minus 105 to plus 100 or even plus 105 range. That's what I'm doing, and then I sprinkled a little bit on the money line, so it's almost like making it into a spread bet, but with a little bit of a better price on it, I suppose. So that's the play. I like the situation for it. I don't like the situation on the Bruins mostly. That's going to do it. Check out the college football and NFL videos I posted. Hopefully there's some good information in there. Hopefully I'm giving out good info, baby. Peace.